This is Lindsay.
Sam.
I'm Jay.
Perfect. So
You're waiting.
Okay. Our project focused on different areas in the southeast and basically a lot of licensing, a lot of different permits, and we created a map to kind of separate all of these boundaries. What? Yep. Perfect. Awesome. So our community partner was Matthew Snyder, and he aimed originally to create a map that kind of helped show different barriers where different licenses are needed throughout the southeast. Because this is really interesting to learn because I just was not familiar with this. But one of the really big issues with fishermen, people who do a lot with boating, different states have different licenses, and a lot of times when you're out in these national parks, it's not very clearly marked, and a lot of times this will come with very heavy fines, even though there was no marking. So we were trying to find data that very explicitly mapped where does a certain permit end and where does another one begin. And kind of an end goal of this project would be to create, of course this is a really big goal, but very long term would be to create an all-encompassing license for a lot of these places. That way it's not having, this map doesn't have to be referenced every second to, am I allowed to fish here? Yeah, so we kind of went by individual states, which was a little bit frustrating because you are having to reach out to different people from different states to be like, hey, do you guys have data? A lot of times we weren't getting responses, but we were able to kind of get what we could from different places. And there was restricted access for a lot of places and special access, so we were really thankful for all the data that we could get. Yeah, and one of the things we ran into was state and federal agencies. They were kind of, yeah, to have like all this accessible service be super on the same terms with us. But so this is kind of our goal. So this is what we started with. This is kind of what we began with. So one of our biggest issues is we clearly had a lot of data, we had a lot of layers, which is a good place to start. But we kind of had it broken down into a little bit of Georgia, South Carolina, a tiny little sliver of Western North Carolina, and mostly Knoxville, which is good because this is kind of the region we were focusing on, was national parks. But so clearly you can see there's different data points everywhere. There wasn't much of a coherent place. Like if experienced fishermen went to look at this would probably be more confusing than helpful. So our main goal was to organize what we had, get more data that we could find, and really create something that would be helpful for a lot of people who enjoy these activities. Yeah, so our objective was to create this map to very clearly be able to see these parks, where trail ends, where are parking lots, what does have boating access, what has marina access, like an all-encompassing like outdoors person street for the southeast, basically, to kind of be able to see where things start and stop very clearly. If anybody has used all trails, I like to think of this as like a much cooler and bigger all trails. So we were able to request from USF, I'm dyslexic, I'm not going to try and read that, that's my bad, to develop a GIS map with these layers to kind of understand this landscape more.
Okay, so getting into kind of what was on the layer wish list, and I'll get into this a little bit with our methodology and how we kind of went through this project step by step, but what was specifically on there, we kind of had to eliminate some things that were unobtainable or we couldn't get right now, and again I'll get into this also, but how we sort of were just establishing like this is the first step, you know, we can't do everything, we have to limit our scope sometimes, but yeah, some of the boundary layers we wanted to see, so national parks and forests, this also included state parks, state forests. We were able to get a lot of these layers from ArcGIS's Living Atlas, which is a great resource for kind of establishing like what's very easy to just research, find, through Esri very quickly, throw it onto the map, integrate it with the data we are also able to collect from the state agencies, like the TWRA, which has a very helpful already interactive map for fishing permits and fishing permit boundaries, stocking areas. But you know, these were sort of the main data layers we were trying to find, integrate into the map, make it, you know, symbolize it, make it very easy to look at, easy to understand. But yeah, we had obviously, so these boundary layers, shape layers, point layers, all these things that would help the map. And then also we kind of, eventually after that point, we're able to see more specific things like service roads, parking, links to licensing data from the state agencies that, you know, handle that, even very specific things like delayed harvest boundaries. Offline capabilities was sort of the thing we were also looking at, because obviously anybody wants to do any recreational activities, you're probably not gonna have Wi-Fi, or there's data, you know, any service. So that was an important thing to consider in sort of how we would create this integrated map. Yeah, kind of getting more into the methodology. So we, you know, everyone comes into this sort of thing when we're working on a project. What's the easiest thing to locate first? And so we look at state agencies. So there's the TWRA, there's the NCWRS, the South Carolina DNR. So all these are just the state recreation agencies, which all happen to have, you know, maps of their own that we're trying to incorporate. And as Ellie mentioned, it's difficult when you reach out to these agencies to get a response when you give an information request. So for example, like South Carolina was able to reach out to us and say, oh no, here, locate this at this link very quickly.
North Carolina, not so much.
North Carolina, I don't like their map personally, what they provide. It's very confusing. I was very confused of how to parse through it. And even then, even the states that got back to us, it was hard to locate certain things. Like they would display, for example, South Carolina on one map, their permit boundary, which is just one boundary between their freshwater and brackish saltwater layer. And we had to create that layer ourselves, georeferencing it from their sources. But yeah, just going through our methodology, yeah, we were trying to find the easiest data at first, you know, get a bare bones assessment of like what a useful map that we've added onto will look like. Make sure that data is, you know, good data, right? Of course, that can only go so far. A lot of it's kind of like, people have already done this has already been used. We're assuming it's, you know, the quality's okay at this point. Obviously, also with georeferencing, you know, you have to take some little leaps of like, okay, this is pretty good, but we're pretty accurate what we're looking at. And then getting into building it into Experience Builder, and then publishing that, and then showing everything we've committed to. So I'll just, on the next slide. So this is kind of what we built for Tennessee, using mostly stuff from the TWRA and living atlas layers. So we were able to see, there's some overlap, which is, you know, we looked at the national wilderness areas, which overlap a lot of where parks are. So the purple you can see is national parks, national forests. You can see a big part of the Appalachian area where, you know, you can see the Smokies. That's where all these trails are. There's a lot of concentration of the trails in those layers, which we sort of assumed that a lot of that data was coming directly trail data that is only from the National Park Service. But we were able to locate some other forestry, fisheries and wildlife services trail layers. But you can also see very clearly the there are 4 permit regions, 3 permit boundaries that we were able to georeference. And the types of trout stocking and reservoir data points that are very crucial for a lot of what the trout fishermen would love to see. And then obviously boating access, we can see this again from the TWRA provided paddling access, marine access, fishing access, boat launch access. Again, very bare bones, cleaning this up. This doesn't look great when you're looking at what does that mean, _1, you know. It's a very rough estimate of like in ArcGIS of what eventually we could show in the Experience Builder app. And yeah, so this was sort of what, you know, we kind of came to as like these are the most crucial layers we can provide at this stage. But again, Lindsay will go into finding so many other resources that were important in the experience builder that we need to bring.
So we do have to start off with the ArcGIS Online. The Experience Builder is not, it's for putting afterward. The ArcGIS Online is where you actually put in the layers. This is where we get to change the symbology and occasionally get to find some cute little icons, not most of them. Oh, I'm sorry guys, this is not my computer. That's not even. Y'all are broken.
You wanna go back? It's the back arrow.
Yeah, fix it. Oh, there we go. That's because this is a picture, guys. I've tried to touch it. It's a picture. So you can see on the left some of the layers that that we all recently just added to be able to get into Tennessee mostly, because that is really where the data is really well prepared. So going through and deciding to rename them, there's no reason to get caught up on the little tiny things of making, until we know we actually want that layer and it does not conflict with another layer. I would like to eventually, and I am going to make a sheet to pass on information for the next group that addresses this. There is a search option, and I would like to be able to have a keyword that you could type in fish, and you go to fish, trout. This all started because trout. This man wanted a trout fish, and it was having a problem. I got involved because I crossed a tiny invisible line on a river and got a fine in a kayak. There was no sign, we didn't know, but if I had the app, I would have known.
They're not cheap fines.
They're
like
not cheap
$200 to
at all.
$300 fines for crossing into a different street that
I didn't
is
know.
not marked.
And they take your equipment.
Yes.
Oh,
my
wow.
God.
So thousands of
My
dollars.
carbon poles, still mad. Sorry, person, we're all very invested in this. But no, so we started the whole thing off with the ArcGIS Online, which hopefully everybody in this class, you've all had been tortured through it. So we, played around with it, and I will not pander to you of all the issues and hangups that we all get to do on that. But this part, if you get to go into Experience Builder, because it is so cool, this is the part where you have to change everything you want to change. If you want it to be a purple line instead of a white line, if you want it to have a cute little fishy icon instead of just a dot, you have to do it all here. Because then you move it into the Experience Builder where we get to add the widgets. And I'll show you on the next one all the really cool ones we got. The big thing with Experience Builder is so that ArcGIS became the web map, and then you transfer it into Experience Builder, and that's when you add all the fun things into it. So for this one in particular, I was able to, part of it's just moving things around and deciding what we really wanted. You can see the cell phone, tablet, and desktop, where every time you make them bigger, make them smaller, it's going to move things around. And I don't want all the icons in the middle of the page when I'm trying to do stuff. And to make sure that it has all the options to it not be in your way. That's a huge one. Because what I see on my desktop before I go while I'm making the plans versus inevitably when the plans don't work out and I'm on my cell phone, I still need it to act the same. Our data sources, absolutely, because there are a lot of anagrams, ridiculous amount of anagrams. And no, none of these, most of them are not cooperative. You have to really, really work. So the Fish and Wildlife Service, Resources National Park, and again, most of this is because there was no national database. Tennessee and North Carolina don't really talk to each other to the extent that they should, and South Carolina doesn't want to talk to anybody. But it's all right there because we meet so many rivers right here. It's nothing to go across from Georgia to Tennessee, and those lines may change. That's in the Supreme Court, fun fact. Tennessee's being sued by Georgia because we may lose part of our river. So the final product, by all means, I don't know if you guys, did everybody get a copy of these, but I do have a QR code for you if you want to touch it. Obviously it's not finalized, but you can go in and play with it and see it. And
It works.
it works. Yeah, I had like 4 people test it. I had to make sure. So this is the actual Experience Builder itself. And I'm going to touch your stuff here. Okay, so we can go over here to our layers. And right now, obviously, none of them are there because why would they be?
I think you're in the legend,
Yeah,
not the
you
layers.
can switch to layer.
Yeah.
If you click on
Oh, yep, there we go. Sorry guys, I'm barely hanging on here. So once you click it, and it's very different than some of the others, things, it's, you know, Google Maps is very different, but you can click on them, you can make them go away. It really does come down to the order, just like ArcGIS does. Whatever you click, that's when that legend pops up for you and tells you what you're doing. We got into some really cool ones, including, which was on the original wish list, but like truck parking, spot towers, the file towers. This one is where the elk fields are. This one seems to be a big hit.
You need to give them a break because the internet's slow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what you need to do. I think you.
My ADHD kicked in, I'm going too fast.
And I feel like one of the coolest things we were able to find that like was so interesting to me was a lot of times if we got something that was like a park or a campsite, we had points for if there were restrooms, how many spots in the parking lot there were, if it was accessible by wheelchair. Like we were able to find ones that I think eventually that would be really nice to have public too. If you did want to bring someone, like if someone wanted to go that is perhaps in a wheelchair, knowing if that's somewhere they'll be able to go. Like I thought that was a really interesting thing. So we were able to find, I think, while we did struggle a little bit, I think most of us like were very happy with the amount we were able to find. And it is being good right now, but as Lindsay's saying, like it is fairly detailed, especially like on the map that Sam was talking about. We had to zoom out because we wanted to have the full picture. If you zoom in to where like the Great Smokies is, you can see those little trail lines, and we were able to get it pretty detailed, which is really cool.
But here's actually one of the original layers that are in there. So not only can you change the actual base maps that's in it, in case you know, right now I started off on the topography one because that happens. To measure in was an amazing widget to use. The elevation is important because not only do you want to walk 2 miles, but you want to know how up and down it is. I also, obviously you can do the search. The fun one here, I am doing too much, I'm sorry. The mile markers, these are all clickable. And when you click them, you get to have all of the information. So what park district it is, that does come in handy, especially if you know what park district is closed for fires and everything else. What watershed it is currently in, because of the Little Pigeon River, that stuff happens with it that you're not allowed to go there anymore. Occasionally, so it's nice to be able to click them and see what's going on. Of course, your legends, that way you know exactly what you're looking at. The base maps, the measure. Down here at the bottom, I did decide to add where you are. On the bottom, you can see your lat long. We do have the pinpoints, the pricks, and this dude right here. So here is your link to Tennessee fishing license, because they're each done individually by state. No, there is no passports. You cannot get a Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia all in the same day. You would just spend a ridiculous amount of money to go to each state. I also did the National Park Service one. Here's a click to Google Maps, because not everybody has Google Maps. The Find a River one, that's actually a really cool one where you can go in and type it. The weather, that's important. Obviously, the offline capability of the weather, I can guarantee nothing about it. But depending on what layers you end up doing, especially using the different states, if you're wanting to trail hike, you can see there are layers on there that are like, here's where the restrooms are, here's the Appalachian Trail so you don't intersect if you don't want to, and you can be able to essentially customize your experience of what you want. I do eventually, on the wish layers, I would like to add keywords, because there is a search option at there in the top, and you can say fish, and that way you can see all the options for you to go fish. You can say hike and see all it is. But the scenic routes, there is a wheelchair accessible one, and that was an amazing layer to hunt down and find, because that's amazing. The waterfalls, they rate waterfalls in Tennessee. So we got a rated waterfall one in there. Overall, it's just really fun, honestly.
As you can see, it goes way beyond trout fishing at this point.
It did, it started off, I
All
swear.
recreational activities included.
But if you can't get to
The trout.
where you're
Trout,
going,
yeah,
You
exactly.
can see a waterfall.
that's right.
So in conclusion, after layer upon layer, our hard work has resulted in a beautiful interactive platform that will continue to be improved upon by future groups. And future steps will aim for offline capabilities, a mobile app, and including more states in the Southeast.
Just a little preview, yeah, we did have, so the South Carolina Department of Recreation had a lot of resources that we could easily extract into ArcGIS Pro and then put back into our experience builder. But at this point, we were like, okay, it doesn't really make sense to just show South Carolina because it doesn't really border Tennessee, so that, we were really hoping for North Carolina because of, sharing the Smokies as kind of in the Appalachian region primarily as the point of that. But, kind of pushing that to the next group saying, okay, look, we already have pretty much a lot of this done. The main thing that's lacking in this map, again, that kind of influenced that decision not to include it right away was the trout data that South Carolina has is a little different in the way it's displayed, and for time's sake, we were kind of limited to like go through and sort that and make it kind of the same as what we displayed for Tennessee. South Carolina, I think they would state at certain points of like just where a stream is stocked, but not specify what type of trout or I think even the watershed. So it was a little bit difficult to like. But again, for the future group, there's that data that's out there, and somebody could sort through Excel. We were a little bit, limited, but displaying it so far, we have public water access, all these sorts of layers that we also included for Tennessee. So it's out there.
The South Carolina one's a little limited. We do also want to find, and it's really hard to find, it's not just bathymetric, but it's also water flow. Would be awesome to have because sometimes the river's low. You don't want to be out there when the river's too low. And combine it with, my trip weather, which if anybody wants to create an app, there's your free idea. I'm driving from Chattanooga to Knoxville. What's my weather on my trip? And that I think would be cool to have a link to it. I don't think it could be integrated, it would absolutely crash. But the special thanks, absolutely, the owner and founder and original idea. Benjamin up here was part of the original chunk map. You okay? You good? Because she was a little stressed about that one. That was a lot.
What?
With the original map, that was a lot.
Oh yeah, no, it was pretty chaotic looking at it. So it feels, I mean, just looking at it, it's like I said earlier, it's good because you have a really good starting point. But now you have to go in and format everything. So like Sam, you were saying, cool, we have the same data point from South Carolina and Tennessee. Wow, they look totally different.
But it's awesome. I'm so glad that we have a starting point. Ben is definitely here. Obviously, Dr. Myra, we didn't really talk to Bridget, but I think you're on here. And then all of several of the anagrams that's all, some of them. There's more. There's so many more. In total, right now, we have 121 layers. Some of them do need cut down and culled. Obviously, I would like a triple search option to be able to filter through, but we only had one semester, so. And we're out. That's it. I think we're out of slides.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Any questions for them?
Hey, let's talk about something that's public facing, and a little bit about liability. So if you put something that's public facing, like an experience builder site, highly recommend something about, and you can find these like generic like data map quality disclaimers, but throw one of those on one of like the splash screens that pops up at the beginning.
Yes.
Because you do not want someone claiming that you were responsible for them being on the wrong side of
On the wrong waterfall. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's actually something that we kind of giggled about in our Zoom meetings was, we need a little thing that's like, you're on your own. Like, here's the basis of data that last we have. Someone's data is all the way back from 2017. I don't guarantee that the road has not been rock fallen and you can't get there anymore. But yeah, it always should have a disclaimer. We agree.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. There's a grain of salt in all of it, but yes, absolutely, it should have a little like, hey, it's not always up to date, especially since you have to replace the base map in Experience Builder. If you update something on ArcGIS Online, it does not immediately transfer into Experience Builder, and that's awful because it would be super convenient if I didn't have to take everything out and put it all back in. But
We talked about that legality of consuming public data too, didn't we, the very first meeting?
have to make sure that it's all public data, trying to make sure that the metadata came through so that credit could be given where credit's due. All the layers have to be public and everything. But yes, no, try to cover our butts and give credit where credit's due. And we can't make money off of it.
Although you will see similar apps out there that do, I don't know how they get around that, but I have a question. So when you started, did you expect the different levels of government agencies to be this compartmentalized?
No,
No, and it wasn't just compartmentalized, it was the accessibility. Unresponsive in the accessibility to their data. Great Smoky Mountains, if you go to NP, the national parks, they have a bazillion layers for Great Smoky Mountains. They've got a bazillion layers for Joshua Tree, but they have almost nothing for Blue Ridge once you get past the North Carolina line. There's another one in South Carolina, I don't remember. But even the OBX, they've got like, it's only the really big ones, but when you start getting into South Carolina, especially Kentucky's kinda helpful, but not really. But no, absolutely, I have a really bad joke to make about the government. Because that was part of this whole thing, is they don't have a way to put it all together.
Which agencies had the most data?
Well, Tennessee was, I think, again, I think it's partially because of how popular the Smokies are, and there's sort of a demand for, I mean, it's not that, obviously Tennessee has any purview over a national park, but the periphery of state parks and recreational areas that need to be invested in and are subsidized by the federal government. I feel like specifically our state does have a pretty good way of resources, and again, yeah, reaching out to them for specific information that they might not collect, that's not general. Yes, you get into some difficult, position where it's unresponsive and difficult to access information, but I feel like the way it presented, it's already what exists on the TWRA web map that they have for recreational fishing and hunting is pretty good compared to what we saw with other states where it was more confusing what symbology they used and because for example, in North Carolina, you immediately see a map and you don't know, like you see red, green, and blue dots and you're like, okay, what does this mean? You click on it, you don't really see it. You have to kind of click around to see, okay, this is specifically the legend of the data, whereas Tennessee's was very quickly, like, you could kind of tell what you're looking at. And I feel like,
Yeah, with North Carolina, some of the pop-ups have different information too. So
Yeah.
they had the same color, but then when you click on the pop-up, it's like completely different information.
Yeah.
And
and they don't show the legend right away. You have to click to it. It's not very, user-friendly. But I think Tennessee's was the most user-friendly, easiest to extract and look at. And North Carolina, that's the issue we had. You couldn't go to the source layer or whatever in ArcGIS Online, and then that's kind of when we reached out, and then they just ghosted us because I don't know what they wanted.
The cohesiveness of icons and symbology is definitely a thing. That way, when you pull up this app, you get the same fishing icon for each state. There is definitely a direct correlation between the information that is available publicly and digitalized online versus when they make money. Great Smoky Mountains is in the top 10 destinations. There's a lot of information on it because it makes money, and so they can afford to have it surveyed. That's really, I think that's part of why South Carolina's mad at us, because we make better tourism money.
there's also, I mean, and this is particular to Congaree, which is the national park in South Carolina. There's also issues that they have internally about boundaries because, long story short, when they made Congaree a national park, there were a lot, that's in the low country in South Carolina, and there were a lot of black populations that had lived there and lived off the land of Congaree, and they weren't allowed to do that anymore. So they actually sued the National Park Service for access. And that's still something that's contested. Some communities have access and they can fish and do other things in the park, but others cannot. So that's probably why they don't have that information.
I say I do have a tribal land layer in there, but I would love, no different than what the Vet Center did. That would be awesome to have like a piece of like, this gas station is on a piece of land that was literally stolen. Don't go there.
We did, this is an interesting discussion I had in another class, but you almost kind of wonder, and I think we did mention this in a meeting, but you know, fishermen, the secret spots you have, does this information lead to kind of, you know, yes, it's a way to discover, but it's kind of it takes out the adventure a little bit of finding things that are not on maps, and you know, you have to take the time to really invest in finding these areas. You know, there's always downsides to something. you know, giving people more access, more freedom, yes, it's overall, I think, a good thing. But you do have to wonder whether, you know, there are definitely negative negative effects, so.
So everyone thought that this was about trout and fishing, but I'm gonna go ahead and reveal to you now that my day job is to clean wastewater for the city of Chattanooga. And my job is on the Tennessee River. It is on the largest blue line in the state of Tennessee. When I go and spend my time doing my hobby, I want to go up to the headwaters of these watersheds and see the water and the water quality in its pristine state, because that's why I do what I do during the day. You know, so how do you think this tool could be used from a biological standpoint? To a trout is an indicator of a clean stream, good water quality. It's more than just where to catch fish. How could this be used by future, you know, biological services in the government, with the universities? How could they talk to each other? How could they share information?
There are so many data layers that I actually didn't put in about the number of trout counts over the last 5 years. They have those data layers in there, downstream from non-point sources, whereas point sources are, and they actually take that information. There's a whole bunch of ecological layers that I didn't put in here. I didn't know that's what you wanted. We went on an adventure, but if you wanted to help the environment,
Scope
I'm
creep,
so-
scope creep.
That's
If you're
right.
So many
interested-
layers.
If you're interested, I
the water
do have
quality.
access to, I believe it's Huck 12, TDEC collects by watershed unit, its water quality ranking, I think on like a 1 to 5 basis. I do have that, so if we would wanna just, you know,
Next year's project.
The
We have a
public,
whole
the
collection
public,
to give next
It's
semester.
difficult to display based on that, but there is a way I think we could, you know, eventually, somebody could eventually, incorporate that.
I'm saying there is, when the public, if you get too technical, they tune out, they don't understand.
Yeah,
But what you're doing is you're tying the public back to their water quality.
yeah.
We do have an option to
Yes.
do 2 maps in there. So we can put in a secondary wet map and make that one more like science orientated, and then have this main map as adventure.
All you have to do is say, look, there's trout in this stream,
It's clean.
it's
It's clean.
clean, it's
You
that,
still can't eat it, the mercury levels, I'm telling you, you can't eat it.
yes, you
You're gonna have
have,
to have another warning, secondary warning pop up.
exactly, the 303D list,
There we go.
yes.
All right, at
So,
11:07, we have.
sorry, we're running long.
No,
Yeah.
chit chat, do you have,
I have a question.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm not a fisher person, but as a hiker, I know that in different places there's volunteer organizations that do cleanup or trail maintenance or things like that. Are there similar things for cleaning up rivers? And would it be good to give a shout out to the organizations in each area?
Absolutely, and I would be more than happy to create a secondary list
That's
on that menu.
Another interesting thing, yeah, because I work, so this was a project at the Department of Forestry funded. I worked on, I had the pleasure of working on last year. But it was called the Community Repairing and Restoration Project. I can link that to you if you want after the presentation. But essentially, we were trying to do that. Yeah, so I think you have heard of, I think it's Riverline, yeah, the path that they're trying to basically link all these trails along the Tennessee River. But there's other local organizations, and they're difficult to map because, yeah, people volunteer basically in these, you know, they're all volunteer-based organizations. It's difficult to say what's their area of interest because it's, you know, it's hard to define.
But it'd be cool to say, hey, if you're fishing the stream, be thankful for this group, and maybe you want to, you know.
Or you
Get
can
involved.
also like contact them if you are in those areas and
Yeah.
it's not clean or whatever, you can contact them and.
I'd say of all the list of things we hear, that would be a
Yeah.
good one to add is
Yeah.
volunteer schedules, and that would be, we love it. But no, thank you all so
Yeah.
much for, like, it's fun. It was a really fun project, it really was, and there's a QR code by all means if you wanna check it out and have fun. I don't know what you're doing over the summer, but don't go to South Carolina, they're mean.
Oh.
Sorry.